fired up? Next round.
Hey guys, MrPokke here, back with another video, and on today's episode of Early Access Review, we are going to be taking a look at our latest S-rank Fire Stun Agent Lighter. He has been teased in the story for the past couple of patches, and we have seen from the live event that he is serving as a role of pretty much, if you want to think about it, as like an upgraded version of Koleda, while providing very unique buffs that specifically targets both the fire as well as ice element. If you guys have seen from the latest story, no spoilers, but there seems to be some interesting interaction between both of these elements as seen from Miyabi, right? So we are gonna be taking a look at his character kits, W engines, Mindscapes, playstyles, and team comms. So without further ado, let's get into today's content.
Subscribe!
So a very quick summary of how Lighter plays. He really does remind me of how Koleda works like with like any of the fire DPS comps, especially with, for example, Soldier 11, where he functions like a quick swap burst daze unit where you essentially want to unleash his chain of basic attacks, which you can just press and hold. It will just unleash the aura, and it will just continue all the way until the morale is completely depleted, in which he will then apply all of his various buffs while dealing tremendous impact, right? And once that is done, you can then swap back into your DPS, either Soldier 11, or if you want to play either Soldier 11, or you can stack onto any buffers like Caesar, Lucy. They can all work, and then swap into your DPS like Soldier 11 or even Alan, right? So that is how he plays in a very rough summary. So taking a look at his character kit, it does have a lot of words, especially if you even take a look at the basic attack multipliers. It is like, I don't know, like 30-40 lines of numbers. Same thing for his core, his skill, and that kind of stuff. So just to So in order to summarize this for you guys, he's really not that complicated of a unit, and you essentially can just boil this down to some pretty basic things, right? So his basic attack, the L-form Thundering Fist, essentially there are 5 different attack animations, and for the 4th to 5th hit is where he starts to unleash his aura. So note that for his aura, which is the 4th to 5th hit, you can only last this for roughly 2.5 seconds before it eventually runs out, and he will automatically land the 5th hit, right? So during the morale burst state, the anti-interrupt level of this 5th hit of basic attack as well as damage reduction is increased to 80% as compared to the previous 40%. You can in fact press and hold your left mouse button or your attack button when you're playing a controller, and it will just automatically release the aura once you're on the 4th basic attack. Note that you can also reposition Lighter during this phase, so you can see that when you're attacking the enemy and the enemy moves too far back, you can just dash and continue on this chain, but note that the ultimate duration wouldn't change, which means that it will still last roughly 2.5 seconds or basically roughly 3 rotations before you actually unload the final hit, which is the last final hit, right? So that is just how his base attack works, and this will go in tandem with how his core skill works, right? So the core passive accelerant, he automatically gains morale over time at a rate of 2.9 points per second, and for each point of energy consumed by anyone, including himself, Soldier 11, Caesar, anyone in the entire team, it will recover an additional 0.26 morale per energy up to a maximum of 100. So for example, if you are playing Soldier 11, which expends a massive 80 energy, then this will convert to 20.8 morale, right? So once you get to above, once morale reaches 80 and above, the next time Lighter switches into battle, he will immediately launch a quick. And this quick assist allows us to instantly charge into the 4th and 5th basic attack, right? And also, if we are reaching 80 or higher, executing the 5th hit of the basic attack puts us in the morale burst state, and enhancing the power of the startup punch, jab combo, as well as the finishing move of the 5th hit of the basic attack. And if the skill hits an enemy with the power increase, it will continuously consume morale, and with every 10 points of morale consumed, increase impact by 2%, which basically goes up to 20%, lasting 6 seconds. During morale burst state, Lighter will not gain any more morale, and once the morale is completely exhausted, he will automatically follow up with a more powerful finishing move. Now, during the morale burst state is where we can apply all of our buffs from Lighter, right? So one thing is going to be reducing the enemy's target Ice Rest and Fire Rest by 15%, lasting for 30 seconds. So this is very, very long debuff comparable to Caesar's shield, right? As well as the fact that if we reach Morale Burst state, when a finishing move hits an enemy, it applies Collapse effect, extending the stun duration by 3 seconds, which is pretty considerable when you want to compare with some of the enemies, such as, for example, some enemies they recover a lot faster, like enemy Jane Doe, but some enemies do recover a lot slower, right? So depending on enemy, this 3 seconds could be very, very impactful. And finally, if the 5th hit hits an enemy and when we switch off the field or when its morale runs out, Lighter will then leave Morale Burst and will keep any unspent morale. So the moment you leave, you can then rebuild morale over time again, right? And then on top of this, the additional ability Fighting Spirit, as long as you have an attack character or people from the same faction, when a 5th hit of Lighter's base attack hits an enemy, all squad members will gain a stack of elation up to 20 times as well as lasting 30 seconds. And every single time we get a trigger, it will reset the duration, so we should be getting the full 30 seconds. Every single stack will increase our ice and fire damage by 1.25%, which is a 25% ice and fire damage buff. As well as the fact that if we obtain elation, for every single point that our impact exceeds 170, for every 10 points of impact exceeding 170, it will increase our buff effect by an extra 0.25%, which means that if we want to get the absolute maximum value, we want to try to hit 270 impact in battle for Lighter in order to gain the maximum of 75% ice damage and fire damage buff applied for entire allies, right? So essentially at this point, the rest of the kit is just pretty straightforward. His dodge as well as his parry is not going to be too important, and then for his ultimate, you are probably not going to be using this and we're saving for main DPS, but we are going to be getting an ultimate system rework in the future, so we might see some usage with Lighter's ultimate. And also, from some of the testing I've done, the ultimate actually does a ridiculous amount of damage for some reason, so take it as you will, right? So the rotations for Lighter is going to be as follows. You want to stack on your morale over time, either from expending energy from himself, for Caesar, for DPS, for anybody, and over time, eventually you will reach 80 and above morale. So at this point, you actually want Lighter to be off field, and you want to swap Lighter in after getting 80 morale or higher so that it will trigger a quick assist, instantly placing him into the 5th hit of his base attack. The moment we land the 5th, which is the final hit of the base attack, it will then enter into his morale burst state. And during morale burst state is where you want to pretty much deplete your morale as fast as possible, because every single time you want to consume morale, it will increase your impact by 2% up to 20%, lasting 6 seconds, right? As well as the fact that during the morale burst state, we also apply our ice rest down, fire rest down, collapse, and once everything is done, you then swap Lighter off field to either your support or your DPS, and the cycle kind of repeats all over itself. For Lighter's special attack, V-Form Sunrise Uppercut, as well as the EX special attack, it is essentially a way for us to increase our energy expenditure because it's very, very quick, as well as providing iframes while allowing us to chain into the 4th hit of the basic attack, which is going to be the Aura, and then it will land us into the 5th hit, right? So think of Lighter's EX special somewhat as like a connecting move, as well as to use up our energy to gain our morale. So generally speaking, as of this point, it starts to come to be I hope that it becomes pretty clear, or at least the way that I've seen it so far, is that he does play a little bit like Koleda, which is he's like a quick swap burst daze unit. You build up your morale bar from spending energy. The moment morale bar is full, use him, swap him in for a free quick assist, deplete his morale bar, and at this point apply all of his buffs, all of his debuffs, and deal tremendous impact upon the enemy. And once his morale is depleted, you can then swap into either your DPS or support, and the cycle will repeat. And that is roughly the rotation that I've come together from using him over the past couple of hours, right? But the skill priority is definitely going to be our core skill, followed by our basic attack, into our EX skill, into our ultimate, dodge, as well as parry. But in the future, since we are going to be getting an ultimate rework, we might need to raise our ultimate in the same priority as our EX skill as well. So with that out of the way, let's just jump straight into Lighter's W engine, right? So his signature W engine, Blazing L'Oreal, is definitely going to be his best in slot with 713 base attack as well as 18% impact. Just like pretty much all of our other S rank W engine, they're all going to be giving us 18% impact. So for him, upon launching quick assist or perfect assist, impact increased by 25% for 8 seconds. And when the equiper launches and hits an enemy with basic attack, applies wield for 30 seconds up to 20 times. And remember, this is going to be very, very easy for Lighter since his base attack is going to be has a lot of frequency from the aura, right? Repeated triggers will reset the duration, and when any enemy And when any squad member hits an enemy, every stack of wield applied will increase the crit damage of ice and fire damage dealt by the attack by 1.5% up to 20 times. So this is going to be essentially a 30% crit damage increase for both ice as well as fire damage. At this point, I also kind of just want to briefly talk about his buffs are essentially all tied into our ice and fire damage dealers, so you are not going to be seeing as much of a universal usage for lighter compared to maybe another stunner like Qingyi, right? But I'll be talking about this a little bit more in the team comp session, right? So Blazing Royale is definitely going to be our best install, but for lighter, luckily there are actually a lot of different substitutes when it comes to what is going to be an alternative if you do not want to pull for his W engine. So one example is actually going to be our Hellfire Gears, which is going to be Koleda's signature weapon, or even the Restraint, which is going to be Lycon's signature weapon, right? Both of them have a impact percent main stat, which is going to be 18%. For Koleda, energy regeneration increased by 0.6 per second is not too bad, allow us to expand our energy a little bit more, which means we get to build up our morale a little bit faster. And whenever we use EX special, the impact is increased by 10% for 10 seconds up to 2 times. And for lighter specifically, he can use his EX special twice consecutively because of the way it functions, right? So we can very easily get this 20% impact at the maximum efficiency. Whereas for Lycon's W engine is also a very nice buff, because when an attack hits an enemy, damage and days from basic attack increase by 6% for 8 seconds up to 5 times, which is going to be a 30% damage and impact increase. And because the lighter's aura hits so frequently, this is also going to be very easy to stack on for lighter himself, right? And another W engine, if you guys actually pull for Qingyi, is actually going to be Qingyi's signature weapon with another 18% main stat. And for Qingyi, base attack hits an enemy gains 1 stack of Terrific, which is going to be giving us up to 20% damage increase for our entire team, as well as increasing the user's impact by 21%, right? So every single one of the W engines, or at least the edge rank ones from Koleda, Lycon, or even Qingyi, they can actually function very well with Lycon. So it is not that important for us to really get Lycon's signature weapon, right? And then for some of our 4-star options, they are actually also not too bad. Most notably going to be our Steam Oven as well as the Precious Fossilized Core. One thing to keep in mind is that if you want to talk about the absolute highest damage increase, in my opinion, the signature weapon is still going to pull up quite a bit of hit. But note that the signature weapon buffs, it is only going to be buffing ice damage as well as fire damage for our crit damage bonus, right? So it might not be as universal if you want to use lighter in other sorts of team comps. So if you appreciate more versatility for lighter, then perhaps other W engines might be more preferable to your situation. And now jumping into lighter's 4-piece and 2-piece drive disc. For his 4-piece, it's going to be pretty straightforward. Definitely going to be the 4-piece impact. Works perfectly, 6% impact, and base attack inflicts 20% more days to the main target, and that's definitely going to be coming from lighter, right? For the 2-piece, frankly speaking, you have quite a lot of options. If you want to go a little bit more damage, 2-piece fire is fine, or even 2-piece attack. If you want to go a little bit more utility, they can even go for 2-piece swing just for the energy regeneration. But in my opinion, it's not going to be that important because lighter is not that tied to him using his EX special, right? So I personally opt for more damage just for the just because pretty much every single unit in Xeno Zone 0, they are all more or less damage dealers, even if you're a support, even if you're a Dazer, or even if you're a DPS, right? So me personally, I went for the 2-piece Inferno Metal. Then for the main stats and subsets, since we cannot get impact as a substat, you can either go for survivability, especially for contents like our battle tower, or if you want to go for offensive stats like crit rate, crit damage, attack percentage, pen ratio, they're all gonna be not too bad, right? For our main stats, in our slot 4, if you want survivability, same thing, HP percentage is going to be great. If you don't have any good crit values, attack percentage is fine. Or if you do want to have very good crit values, then crit rate is going to be our main stat, right? Then for our slot 5, you either go defensive style like HP or defense, or fire damage bonus. And finally for slot 6, it's going to be impact percentage, no questions asked, because lighter doesn't really want the energy regeneration as compared to getting as much impact as humanly possible, right? So overall, his drive this is also pretty straightforward. Essentially, anything that you will build for Qingyi, you can then proceed to just slap it onto lighter, just that you want to swap the 2-piece a little bit, right? So that's gonna be that. So now moving on to lighter's Mindscapes. First, the very first Mindscape, increasing our collapse effect for the stun duration from 3 seconds to 5 seconds, right? Note that it is not an increase of 5 seconds, it is simply from 3 to 5, while further reducing ice rest and fire rest by 10%. So instead of 15%, it is now 25% ice rest and fire rest, right? The more powerful finishing move that follows when morale is completely exhausted also deals 30% increased damage. I would say that overall, this is probably one of the more comfortable Mindscape ones. Not only does it improve your overall damage, in a vacuum 10% rest down is roughly equivalent 10% or even higher for any like ice DPS or fire DPS, right? As well as the fact that you do get that 2 additional seconds for the extended stun duration, going from 3 to 5, as well as the final 30% damage increase, all into a single Mindscape. So in my opinion, between Mindscape 1 or his signature weapon, I'll personally pull for the Mindscape 1. Then jumping into Lighter's Mindscape 2 Red Scarf, when applying Collapse via core passive accelerant, stun damage multiplier increased by 25%, and the increase to ice damage and fire damage increases to 120% of the original. Generally speaking, stun damage multiplier increase is always going to be a very good passive to have. You can see it from Qingyi, you can see it from Lycon, but at the end of the day, I feel that this doesn't really change the core functionality of Lighter's kit. It doesn't really change the rotations, just basically a very, very flat out damage increase. I would say that this is going to be roughly an overall 20% final damage increase for our entire team, right? Roughly speaking. Then for our Mindscape 4 sunglasses, when we are off-field, energy regen for on-field character increased by 10%, and when upon entering morale burst state, restores 4 energy for all-field characters once every 18 seconds, right? So since the rotation is going to be build up on morale, swap out of Lighter, and then swap into Lighter when we have the max morale, you will pretty much always restore this 4 energy for all of our off-field characters anyways. So just an overall pretty comfortable quality of life Mindscape. If you don't really want it, you don't really need to care about it that much, right? Just improve your rotations for the entire team. And then finally, Mindscape 6, it is a whole chunk of text, but basically it can be boiled down to this: your morale recovery is 200% of its original value, which is essentially twice. You're gonna be able to charge your morale twice as fast, as well as you get this 250% attack multiplier as fire damage once every 8 seconds. And if our impact exceeds 170, it goes up by 5% up to 500% increase. And since we are going to be trying to hit 270 impact, you shouldn't really face too much of a problem, especially when you really reach an M6 Lighter, right? And the more powerful finishing move that follows when our morale is completely exhausted, it will trigger an additional activation of Blazing Impact when hitting an enemy. Essentially, this will drastically improve Lighter's personal DPS output, as well as basically doubling his morale gain, which will make his rotation a lot faster. Whether it's gonna be worth it, that's gonna be up to the will to decide, and we'll be testing this out next time in 1 versus $2,000 Lighter, right? So TLDR, Mindscape 1, very, very nice Mindscape to have, more important than signature weapon in my opinion. Mindscape 2, pretty much just an overall damage increase of roughly 20%. Mindscape 4, comfort Mindscape, and finally Mindscape 6 just turns him to an absolute monster for all of my whale friends, right? So that is gonna be that for Lighter's Mindscape, his kit, his WNJ. And now finally we're gonna be talking about essentially his team comps and what I found when I was playing him, right? In my opinion, Lighter's current best in slot team as of this moment is going to be with either Soldier 11 or Alan Joe, as they are basically the only 2 beneficiary of Lighter's ice damage buff, ice rest down, or fire damage buff, fire rest down, on top of the 3 seconds of collapse, which I guess you could say is pretty universal, right? Between Alan and Soldier 11, I would say that for players who already have Qingyi, or if you already have Caesar, Lighter might not offer that much higher of a value if you want to slot him with a Alan Joe team. So for example, if you're running Alan and you already put for a Qingyi, she might not be as compatible since Qingyi is also an on-field dazer. So technically, Lighter would suit Alan a little bit more. But generally speaking, Qingyi also offers a lot to the table with her 80% stun damage multiplier increase, and the overall flexibility of playing Qingyi is also really, really nice, right? You can dodge, you can weave in your parries, you can weave your counters quite easily, at least from what I've been playing in the Battle Tower. So in my opinion, if you already have it, it might not be that important to use it on Alan. Not to mention, the original OG Ice team of Alan Joe, Lycon, and Sokaku, they are still very much viable in all of our endgame content. So pulling Lighter exclusively just for Alan, it is really more of a comfort and damage pick, and I wouldn't say it's an absolute must compared to the amount of utility and of comfort that units like Caesar or Qingyi can provide to Alan Joe, right? So that's gonna be there. And another reason is also because Alan Joe also works extremely well with Caesar, since Caesar's anti-interrupt shield makes Alan pretty much impervious to any damage, especially when the final hit of her basic attack has such a long hit drag, right? Which brings us to the next question. Soldier 11. Now, between Soldier 11, there's also another fire DPS, which is going to be Bernice. But as of what we have seen right now, Bernice is going to be exclusively a best in slot team comp for this other team comp, such as Yanagi, or maybe in the future when Miyabi comes out, right? So, if you want to run lighter, you could, but he could be competing a slot with either Yanagi or Caesar in that specific order, right? If you really want to slot into either more stun values, or if you want to just trade in for you're either swapping him out for Caesar, in which you're gonna be technically dealing more stun values than Caesar, but you will lose the comp from Caesar's shield, or you swap out Yanagi and you run a lighter Bernice and Caesar. But if you are gonna be doing this, do expect your damage to drop off like quite a bit, because Yanagi does a ridiculous amount of damage, right? So that's gonna be there for Bernice, which basically brings us to Soldier 11. In my opinion, that is the team that stands to gain the most. So if your account does have Soldier 11, I believe that pulling lighter for accounts like with Soldier 11 will stand to gain the highest, compared to accounts where you are pulling for Alan Joe, or if you're pulling for Bernice, or if you're even thinking of pulling lighter for future units, right? So all these are kind of not as valuable, I would say, as compared to pulling for Soldier 11. In my opinion, the testing I've done is going to be using lighter with Soldier 11, and my third slot, you can run either Caesar or Lucy. Lucy for a little bit more damage, Caesar just for the overall comfort, while also providing a very good amount of damage herself, right? So what I've found with this team is that the stun time, the stun speed with lighter plus Caesar is extremely fast. When I see from the builds you have seen in the background right now, we usually get the break within roughly 5 to 7 seconds, if I'm not mistaken. After using one full aura, we can either swap back into Soldier 11 to just deal raw damage, swap back into Caesar just to apply a little bit more shield or do a little more parry, and then we can just perfect parry with lighter back again. It will daze the enemy extremely quickly. That being said, while he does not offer any stun damage multipliers, he still offers us very good amount of 15% fire damage. He still offers us 15% fire rest down, as well as the fire damage buff on top of the 3 seconds of collapse, which could also be very beneficial by itself, right? So you can see So as you guys can see from the footage, I do have quite a lot of convert when I'm using lighter with Soldier 11 and Caesar from what I've been testing in some of the Notorious Hunt bosses so far, right? And for Soldier 11, I think this is also going to be quite easy for us, because one thing about Soldier 11 is that unless you master the timing for Soldier 11's basic attack, you will run out of the Fire Sword state. Whereas because you have the power of lighter and Caesar, you can daze the enemy extremely quickly. So Soldier 11 mains who are not as comfortable with playing on a scenario where you are going to be running out of fire, because you daze the enemy so quickly, you can then pretty much always stay in Soldier 11's Fire Sword state. As you can see from this rotation, from one burst, we'll swap into Soldier 11 as our fire on DPS. We'll use 2 sets of full Flame Enhanced base attack, and then we'll use our skill for another 2 full sets of Enhanced basic attack. And finally, if the enemy is still not dead, you can either press your ultimate, or you can just swap back into Lighter and Caesar, and they'll basically get the job done all over, right? So very comfortable rotation, I would say. And this is coming from somebody that pretty much has never played Soldier 11 in his entire life, because I don't even have Soldier 11 on my own account, right? So that is what I've found so far going forward. So in summary, for team comps, I do believe that he benefits Alan Joe and Soldier 11 a lot more compared to all of our other DPS. But between Alan Joe, Soldier 11, or maybe even Bernice, Soldier 11 stands to gain the most with the addition of lighter, compared to Bernice, which currently has Yanagi plus Caesar, or Alan Joe, which currently has either Lycon Sokaku or Caesar Sokaku, right? So that is gonna be the TLDR. And in my opinion, whether shield pull for him really depends on what the future meta is going to hold. As of this current moment, I would say the lighter spot in the meta, it might be a little bit niche, because his buffs are only applied to ice and fire DPS. In the future, if MiHoYo releases more ice and fire DPS, because we already know Miyabi is going to be coming out, maybe lighter could see a little bit more usage going forward, but for now, he stands to be less versatile compared to units like Qingyi, Koreeda, or even Lycon, right? So that's gonna be that. And with that, we have come to the end of lighter's early access review. Let me know what you guys think of him in the comments below. Where we pulling for him, how you guys be using him, pulling him for Miyabi, etc, etc, right? So word of the day is going to be Aura. I don't know. Join Twitch, join YouTube, join Discord, join TikTok, and join Twitter. All the best for Gacha Pools, and I'll see you guys next time. Take care.